Hey everybody, it's Justin Longo here. I'm going to make my first official ranting video. I don't know what to call these, but I'm hoping to start a little thing where I've got stuff to say based on what I'm seeing on Facebook and what I'm hearing from people. And I'm going to try to make some regular videos that are a few minutes long, just telling the world what I think about certain things. Sometimes it's just a lot easier to talk into a crappy camera on a laptop than to write out an entire blog post. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was on Facebook I noticed that there was a bill going through the Colorado legislature that was an attempt to ban trans fats. And I heard the typical right of center conservative outrage over the state trying to ban trans fats. And it got me thinking, you know, there are reasons for being angry at trans fats bans and salt bans and sugar bans of all sorts, alcohol bans, smoking bans. It's kind of bizarre that they are against certain prohibitions like trans fats and like salts and like smoking, but then at the same time they are very fervently pro-drug war and they're for prohibiting drugs, including things benign like pot. So I was just curious to hear what exactly is the metric that the right is using to determine that trans fats and sweet treats of all sorts, smoking and alcohol and prescription drugs should be legal, but pot should be illegal, cocaine should be illegal. I just don't know what exactly is the selection process for that way of thinking. And there's a few common arguments I hear that just don't make any sense because they're not applied consistently. And the first one you'll hear is that the conservative doesn't want to pay for somebody else's poor decisions and their poor behavior, which is totally legitimate, but they don't apply that across the board. So yes, a conservative can say, I do not want to pay for a heroin addict's heroin addiction, but then being against smoking bans and alcohol bans and trans fats bans and sweet treat bans doesn't make any sense, because somebody that decides to eat hamburgers and donuts and cupcakes every day and smokes a pack a day is certainly going to have incredible health costs that, because of our socialized medical system, we're all paying for. So if you want to be consistent and use the argument that I don't want to pay for your poor behavior, well then you have to be against trans fats and you have to be against salts. You have to be for prohibitions on bad foods, chemically altered foods, and you have to kind of be for mandating broccoli and Brussels sprouts and mandating exercise and all those things. So it really puts you in a precarious situation where you have to argue against things that you might not want to argue against, and you have to be arguing for mandates for things that you probably don't want to argue for. So the I don't want to pay for somebody's poor behavior, that goes too far, and it makes the right argue in favor of things that they probably don't want to. So that doesn't make any sense. And then the other one you'll hear is, it harms your body. Drugs harm your body. Well, so does eating poorly. So does smoking cigarettes. So does consuming alcohol. So does drinking too much caffeine. It just doesn't. It's too selective. It's too arbitrary. I mean, why is eating a dozen Krispy Kremes every day and being 450 pounds worse or not as bad as being a pothead? I mean, what's the distinction? If it harms your body, well, so do a lot of other things. So does not exercising. So are you saying that we should mandate exercise? That doesn't really follow. So the last one you'll hear and this is a little less popular, but you'll hear we should prohibit drugs because they're dangerous. Well, that's really weak, because then you've got to argue that we have to prohibit swimming in pools, we have to prohibit driving a car, we have to prohibit skiing, all sorts of things that are very dangerous and much more dangerous than smoking pot. And so the it's dangerous argument also doesn't work. What I'm saying is that you don't have to agree with the libertarian position that everything should be legal, not because of any argument from effect, but simply because I control my body and therefore I have a right to determine what goes in it. So all the arguments from effect are just kind of weak and don't get applied consistently. So if you're going to make a distinction, and this goes for people on the left, if you're going to make a distinction between drugs on the one hand and bad fatty foods and cigarettes and alcohol on the other, give me a reason why you're making that distinction. What metric are you using to say one thing should be prohibited and one thing should not be? If you're on the left and you think drugs are okay and trans fats are bad, what metric are you using? If you're on the right and you think trans fats and Krispy Kremes and cigarettes are okay, but pot is bad and cocaine is bad, well, what metric are you using? Just be consistent and apply your argument consistently and see where it goes. Because I imagine that if you're arguing from effects and you're arguing consequences, you're not going to like where it goes when you apply it universally and you're consistent. So that's all that I ask. Tell me what metric you're using and apply your argument consistently. And if you can, please stop arguing from effect, because it just doesn't work out. So that's all I have to say on the matter. I'll try to report back on the next thing that irks me or the next thing I find interesting on Facebook.